It should be fixed, guys. Yeah, the echo's gone. I just had to listen to see what the audio was. All right, so I'm gonna get into the episode. Yeah, I apologize for the audio issues, guys. Skype is a bitch, basically. There shouldn't be an echo anymore at this point because I've muted Twitch. I just left it on. So I want to do this episode. It'll be interesting to see if I can kind of carry this discussion for a good hour and a bit by myself. But I'm looking for your guys' feedback, and I definitely want to engage with the audience on this one. But I wanted to talk about the subject because I feel like it's something that um, definitely happens in the community, and I'm going to kind of get into specifically what I'm talking about in a sec here. And I'm also just going to add. Hold on one sec. I'm just going to add my there's some background audio as well, so it's a little bit less weird when it's just me. Let me know if you guys can hear that background audio as well. All right, so let's talk the subject. So I kind of broke it down into 3 separate categories, and I want to kind of get into each of them separately. But overall, the topic really comes down to getting into the ethics and kind of the whole environment right now in Warhammer and in our hobby around recasting, around IP theft, and I'm going to kind of differentiate those in a sec, and also piracy, which I'm going to also differentiate a little bit. So I guess I want to start by kind of talking a little bit about how I look at these 3 different kind of segments and how I differentiate them, because it is important. And I do think that there's going to be some, I guess, people on both sides in each of these categories. And I think I'll start off by saying in these areas, I don't know if I have the right answer, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to come up with a black and white answer on whether I think this is something that is right or wrong. I think the answer is probably going to be really up to each individual person and what they're comfortable with, and really about what your ethical code is. I often think of the tale of Robin Hood, right? So famously, he stole from the rich and he gave to the poor. And I think a lot of people would look at what Robin Hood did and say that he was a hero for the people, and he was someone that often is looked up upon as someone that did a lot of good for the denizens of Sherwood Forest, or whoever he helped out in Nottingham and stuff. And so when I look at I guess um, the way that our community approaches this subject, I often do think of the kind of story of Robin Hood. And so just talking about the 3 different areas. So let's talk recasting for a sec. So recast is something that I want to very clearly define. And for me, recasts are basically exact replicas of Games Workshop models, or other models of other companies, obviously. In this case, I'm going to be talking mostly Games Workshop, that have been recast in another material that are exact duplicates. So these are essentially copies of existing Games Workshop models, or models that exist, and someone has gone, and I know there's lots of recasters out there. They're available in China, Russia. There's even some in the US as well, that basically take existing models, recast the bits, and then resell them as basically that model. So, and they're pretty easy to find. You can go on various websites and find them. As far as IP theft, so for me, IP theft and intellectual property theft really has to do with things like 3D printing. So 3D printing is a big area right now in the game, and there's a lot of 3D prints out there that aren't actually recasts, so they're not copies of existing Games Workshop models, but they're using Games Workshop intellectual property, whether it's the visual aesthetic, or whether it's just alternative sculpts of existing models. So these aren't models that were these weren't like Games Workshop kits that were taken and copied. These are actually people that have 3D sculpted models using Games Workshop intellectual property, and are either selling the STLs or giving away the STLs, or some people just use the STLs, don't do either, and they just use them for their own personal use. And then piracy really comes down to And where we were going to talk about piracy in this discussion is when we start really talking about things like digital products. So I know I mentioned quite a few times in the show that I think the lack of digital army books is a problem. But we also see piracy in places like Battlescribe. So Battlescribe is a very well-loved and well-used application, and I'd say a lot of the population uses a program like Battlescribe. And the question that comes with a place like Battlescribe is that ethical? Is that something that should be like lauded or looked upon? Because Battlescribe provides something for the community that is otherwise not available, and a lot of people use Battlescribe. So these are kind of the areas where I really want to kind of dig into today, and I'm welcome your guys' comments and feedback as we kind of get into it. And as I said, I don't have clear answers for all of these things, but I do want to kind of get into the deep conversation around it and figure out where I'm comfortable with it and where I'm not comfortable with it, and then hopefully you guys can take some of that and hopefully make your own decisions as to how you're willing and able to engage with these various things. So let's talk recasting for a sec. So I will come out and say I own recasts, obviously, and that was part of the reason that I didn't want anyone else on this cast, because I don't want anyone to have to implicate themselves. So I own recasts. Some are from China, some are from Russia, and I'm not ashamed of it. With that said, I also own majority of my models. I'd say 98% of my models are Games Workshop authentic models. I don't own any recasts of available plastic kits, and I'm saying that very carefully because I wanna be really clear on what that means. And now, where do I think the whole recasting market comes into play? So I guess with recasts, there's a few things where I feel comfortable with the idea of recasts, and I feel like we should feel comfortable with recasts. So the first case is in the case of out of production models or limited edition models. So to give you some examples, there's quite a few Death Guard models and Chaos models that are extremely limited edition, and they're extremely out of production, or they've been out of production for many years, and they're not available. They're just not available to buy. And in those cases, I actually don't think it's an issue for people to purchase recasts. I simply don't, because at the end of the day, Games Workshop is not losing anything there. So if Games Workshop is producing a model that is no longer available, then if Games Workshop is no longer selling a model that's no longer available, and the only way to get it is through a recast, then I actually don't think there's anything wrong with that, because I think ultimately it's not really hurting Games Workshop, and it's not really hurting their bottom line, and you're not really stealing from anyone, because it's not like you could go and purchase that model. And I would encourage, and this is the big thing, I would encourage that when available, people do go buy authentic models. And we're going to get into Forge World in a sec here. I'm really trying to I'm really trying to differentiate Forge World specifically, and I'll get to why I think Forge World recasts can be problematic. But when I'm talking about out of production models, I definitely own some, especially we look at things like the Katachan lieutenants that were quite rampant, some of the limited edition models, and that were just not available. Obviously, there's been a lot of models over the years that have gone out of production. And, we also look at things like old books, so Old Hammer. And I'll kind of refer to all the old games as Old Hammer. So if I wanted to go get some old Bretonnian models or Tomb Kings models, they just don't exist anymore. And so in those cases, I actually don't think there's an issue with recast. I think it's totally appropriate. And this is where I think Games Workshop really has an opportunity, because I think that if Games Workshop wanted to make more money, they could partner with, and this is what I would like, and I'm hoping that Games Workshop sees this market as a potential for them. I think a great idea for Games Workshop, if they wanted to actually kind of crush this market and take over this market, is they could partner with, say, a very high-end 3D printer or 3D resin recaster, and get them to actually produce these out of production models for them. So if Games Workshop doesn't want to be in the business of producing old resin models, models, I think a really great business model for them would be to partner with, say, let's just call them like a high-end recaster or high-end limited edition, high-end 3D printer, and have them actually 3D print parts and models for Games Workshop on their behalf. And in that case, I would feel a lot more comfortable purchasing those models. Another area where I think it's appropriate for owning recasts is when it comes to the box, the assortment of parts in a box set. And so what do I mean by that? So I currently own, I have 10 Chaos Terminators that I own. And in the box set, you get, I think you get 3 chain axes, and you get 3 lightning claws, I believe. So I actually ordered, and I own, additional lightning claws and chain axes from that set that have been recast in 3D resin. So they're identical to the Games Workshop bits, but it allows me to have a full unit of 10 Chaos Terminators with 10 chain axes and or 10 lightning claws. So in this case, because of the fact that Games Workshop, there's no ability for me to buy additional parts, I'm able to purchase like basically the missing weapons of that set and play with that. So that's also something that I find is, I think, okay. And you know, Games Workshop has shown time and time again that they are willing to create sets like bit sets and part sets for various models. And this is, again, for me, it's not the end of the world, because I wouldn't be buying those kits anyways. I wouldn't buy, for instance, 3 more kits of Terminators just so that I can have enough parts to make 10 chain axe models or 10 lightning claw models. I just wouldn't do it. It's just not something that I would do. So in that case, again, I feel like having those recasts is not the end of the world. Now, where do I think recasts get a little bit of a grayer area? So there's 2 specific cases where I think recast models are a little bit harder to justify, but again, I actually don't think, you know, I can see people being on either side of it. And so the first is when it comes to Forge World. So when it comes to Forge World, what you have to look at is value. And for me, there's a fine line there when Games Workshop is producing some of these Forge World models, and the cost and the value of these models is not there. So for instance, if I want to create a you know, like let's say a 3D resin dreadnought, right? And if Games Workshop is going to charge $300 for it, well, you as a consumer have 2 options. You can either, 3 options. You can either not buy it at all, you can buy it authentically, or you can buy a recast. Now, if you're not in a financial place, or if you're not able to financially own that or afford that $300 Forge World model, well, then the alternative is to not buy that model at all currently. And in that case, Games Workshop gets $0 from you. Or you can purchase a recast, in which case Games Workshop also gets $0 from you. So in both cases, like at the end of the day, you're not going to be purchasing that. You're not going to be purchasing that 3D model to begin with, right? There's also quite a bit of quality issues with Forge World, and in fact, some of the recasts that I have from Forge World are actually better quality than the originals. And I have a lot of original Forge World. All of my Daredeo Dreadnoughts are original. Most of my Forge World is actually authentic. I have some parts, again, just going back to parts for Forge World, where I wasn't able to get the parts because they just don't produce them anymore. And in those cases, I own recasted models or bits. The other area where I think it's an issue is availability. So a lot of the Forge World range has now gone out of production, and in those cases, I don't think it's actually the end of the world to own recasts. So I guess what I'm saying is, now where do I think it's not okay to own for recast? Where do I think it's not a good thing? So when it comes to plastic kits, available plastic kits, I don't own any of those that are Forge World. So if I can go buy a plastic kit, say Terminators or you know, whatever, I will never own recasts of those. And the reason is because the plastic kits are superior, and I want to encourage Games Workshop to continue to make great plastic kits. So I'm putting my money, my hobby dollars, where I think it's important, and that's in purchasing plastic kits. Now, when it comes to out of stock plastic kits, that's another issue. And the question you have to ask is, how long, especially with these supply chain issues, how long do you think it's reasonable for you to wait before these plastic kits are in stock? So to give you two examples of where I think there's, again, another gray area, which I don't really know the answer. You just got to make your own decision. So let's talk heavy intercessors for a sec. I have a bag, and I'll show you guys right now. Where are they? Somewhere up here of heavy intercessors. Actually, I can't find them. Let me see if I can find them. Hold on. So here. Now, these are actually 3D printed, but I just want to show you guys what they look like. So I have a set of heavy intercessors. The heads are off right now, but they're basically 3D prints heavy intercessors. These are actually for a client of mine, commission paint client, and they're not mine. And he sent them to me because he wasn't able to get heavy intercessors for himself. And these were sent to me about 2 months ago. So that's part of a large commission that I've been working on. And he wanted heavy intercessors, and the models were just not available at the time. You couldn't get them individually, and you couldn't get them. You couldn't get them. So he decided that rather than wait for these kits to come out, he was going to send me some 3D printed heavy intercessors. And that was, again, a decision that he made. He was okay with, and I'm okay with painting them because at the end of the day, it doesn't make a difference to me. Now, when it comes to kits that are no longer available, so I've had 2 boxes of Deathwing Knights that I ordered in February on Games Workshop web store that have still been out of stock for 2 months. Or sorry, since February. So 4 months I've been waiting for Deathwing Knights. Now, do you think that's a reasonable amount of time? I don't know. It seems like a very long time for someone to wait for products. So in the case where Games Workshop cannot keep up with supply, you know, what are your alternatives? You either don't have those models, especially if you're waiting for the models to get ready for an event, or you purchase recasts. And I know I can get Deathwing Knights right now from the Chinese recaster that I have available to me, and I haven't done that yet because I'm not in a rush to get those Deathwing Knights, and so it's not a big deal for me to wait. But a lot of people, especially for events, they do need that time, right? They do need those models sooner. So in those cases, I think there's definitely a case to be made that you know, recasting is I guess, like, okay, but it's just really hard to say. So in those cases, I actually don't think it's the end of the world if those models are recast, because again, you as a consumer are trying to purchase models from Games Workshop, and they're making it incredibly hard. So these are the cases, I guess, where I think recast is a little bit more of a gray area. So it's for models that are either just out of stock for a very long time, like those Deathwing Knights, or models where Games Workshop is putting them behind like a box set wall. So for instance, the new White King that's coming out for Age of Sigmar, I believe it's not going to be available for 4 or 5 months. So if you want to play with that model right now, you have to buy a $190 kit. And I don't think we should reward Games Workshop with bad business practices. So in that case, I'm ambivalent towards if someone went and got that recast. In all these cases, the argument that I would make is Games Workshop is not really losing any money, because a lot of the people purchasing these recasts probably just wouldn't buy them otherwise. And I don't know what you guys think. Would you guys buy models that are either a really bad value, or would you just convert them up? Because that's actually essentially what I did. So with my Derridio Dreadnoughts, I'll give you guys a very good example. With my Derridio Dreadnoughts, I purchased the Dreadnought bodies from Forge World Authentic, but the weapon arms for the Butcher Cannons were incredibly expensive. They were like, I think they were something like $60 per arm, or like it would have almost doubled the cost of the Dreadnought. So instead of purchasing the authentic 3D arms from Games Workshop, I actually ended up converting the weapon arms out of bits in my box. So that was a decision where I decided that the cost for that bit was too expensive, and instead of purchasing it, I just converted it, and I used things in my bits box, which was free. All right, there's a other cross street from a fire department, so sorry about the sirens. Now my alternative would have been to Yeah, exactly. So in a lot of these cases, people are just not buying the models instead of saving up their money. And look, I spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars at Games Workshop every year. I probably spend on average around $200 to $300, $200 to $300 a month with Games Workshop. So we're talking probably on average, you know, $4,000 to $5,000 a year easily. I spend on Games Workshop, not even a question. So yeah. So I think at the end of the day, when it comes to recasts, I do believe that often Games Workshop is a bit of a victim of their own doing here. And as much as I think that there are cases where people are gratuitously doing it. So again, in the case of plastic kits, which are readily available and at decent value, I think people should buy the plastic kits for sure, 1000%. When it comes to things like out of production models, when it comes to things that are not available or things that are extremely bad value, I don't think that it is wrong. And maybe that means my moral compass is a little bit off, but that's just the I guess stance that I'm willing to take. Now, what I would like, and I think what the solution should be, and what I would like to do is I want to give Games Workshop my money because I want them to continue to make the best models in the world. And so I think Games Workshop needs to sort out their own shit. They need to look at the value of some of their models that they sell and adjust it so that it's better value. They need to ensure that their stock levels are sufficient so that people can actually get those models. And they also need to make sure that they don't continue down this path of super limited edition models that are impossible to get. Because if you're a Catachan player, basically, and you play Imperial Guard, the last 3 models that have been released for your faction have basically been super limited edition. So you're in this situation where you just can't get the models. And like the Catachan Lieutenant or the Sergeant, the guy that looks like the guy from Predator, he's going on eBay right now for hundreds of dollars. So that's a model where Games Workshop has basically set themselves up for failure. And then also there's a lot of models that just don't get made anymore. So some of the old Imperial Guard miniatures, old Hammer stuff. So Battlefleet Gothic, War Master. So these are games that still exist and people want to play them, and they can't get the models. So in those cases, again, I don't think it's the end of the world. I think Games Workshop isn't losing anything. So I guess when it comes to recasting, that's kind of my overall thoughts. What I would say is, don't be one of those people that just purchases recasts. Don't be one of those people that purchases plastic models that are readily available in recasts just to save yourself some money. I do think Games Workshop makes the best plastic kits in the world, and we should continue to support that aspect of it. We should continue to pay for those plastic kits because I think they are actually amazing and the technology is amazing, and we wouldn't get that if people didn't purchase those kits. So let's move on to kind of 3D printing and IP theft. So this is another area where I think, again, there's a lot of gray area, but overall, I actually don't think is a big issue for Games Workshop. So when it comes to yeah, well, Lojax is you're making a good point, Lojax. It's like why wouldn't you is because it's theft, right? So the only thing that's saying that you shouldn't do it is that it's theft. Now, whether you think you're okay with that or not is a different thing. So to give you guys a good example, there's a lot of things that I'm okay with. I guess I'm morally okay with because I don't think that, I live a very moral life, I'd say in general. But when it comes to where I spend my money, I'm a little bit more, I guess, picky on how and where I spend my money. So, yeah, and we can talk about that. So let's talk about IP theft and 3D printing. So when it comes to IP theft, I think this is a lot more of a sticky area. So let's talk about a few things. So 3D printing especially is where I guess my interest really lies, because I think there's a lot of 3D printers out there that are creating facsimiles of Games Workshop models. And also when we talk about things like Astartes, right? So Astartes or the TV shows or some of the animations that they do, these are all essentially IP theft. And what I mean by IP theft is people are using Games Workshop intellectual property, so their art, their designs, their, I guess, lore, to create new and unique things that Games Workshop is not producing. And when I really think about it from a grand scale, I actually think that this is good for Games Workshop. I think it's a good thing that people are using Games Workshop IP and creating fan-made content. Now, that fan-made content could be movies, could be animations, could be things like I don't know if you guys ever saw the animation for The Last Church. It was basically a Graham McNeil short story that was animated, and Games Workshop gave him a cease and desist. So there's lots of fan art, lots of great artists that produce Games Workshop branded art, or art that uses Games Workshop IP. And I actually think that this is a wonderful thing because it enriches the game, it enriches the people that are involved in the it enriches the fan base as well. And there's lots of really amazing Games Workshop art out there that is not produced by Games Workshop. So in that case, I think it's totally fine and nice. I think where the gray area is are they making money off it? But again, like, you really have to look at the nature of that money making. So in the case of fan art, if I say have a Patreon, right, where I produce daily art, and that's Games Workshop art, and I have a Patreon where people can support the time I spend to produce that art, am I making money off Games Workshop IP? I mean, I guess in some way. If people are supporting my Patreon or my my ArtStation or whatever the websites are, where people can essentially tip me for the art that I produce, and a lot of my art is Games Workshop IP, then yeah, technically I am making money off Games Workshop IP. But again, I don't think that actually hurts anyone because Games Workshop isn't producing that stuff anyways, right? And then when it comes to 3D printing, 3D printing what fills a massive gap in the market, where Games Workshop is not being there. And again, we go back to, so for instance, my whole Soul Drinkers army has 3D printed Soul Drinkers emblems on the shoulder pads. I have lots of alternative bits, lots of weapons I've ordered 3D printed, whether it's power swords, power fists, all sorts of stuff. And in that case, I do think that it's okay because, again, I don't think it's actually taking anything from Games Workshop. We're using their IP, but they also, like, elves are not Games Workshop originally. Dwarves are not Games Workshop originally. So each of these, they've taken a lot of their kind of core concepts and they've adopted it for their market, and they've resold it. So this whole concept where, I'm going to make a Games Workshop 3D print and then sell it, as long as it's something that is maybe not available through Games Workshop, I'm totally fine with it. Yeah, and another area where recasting I think is an issue is like New Zealand. Yeah, Diary Avenger makes a really good point in chat. He says recasting is very popular in New Zealand on account of how stupidly everything is priced. So when Games Workshop prices you out of a market, you turn to piracy. You turn to this kind of recasting. And in that case, again, if the options are either you don't play the hobby at all, or you play the hobby but say 50% of your models are like recast because you can't otherwise play, it's still beneficial for Games Workshop for you to have that avenue available, because you're still going to buy some Games Workshop stuff. It's not like everything you buy is going to be recast, but by having access to some cheaper alternatives, it doesn't really, I guess, it enables you to continue playing. And I actually don't see it much different. So here's the way I look at it. So RTLW makes some really great miniatures. They do 3D printing great miniatures. And RTLW makes some really cool miniatures. They make alternative sculpts for aspect warriors. So they have like Dire Avengers, they have Striking Scorpions, they have guard models. And these are models that otherwise people would just not have or not have available. And because of the fact that they make 3D sculpts of them, a lot of people are now playing the game with models they otherwise would not own. So in that case, I think by them having that available, it actually means that Games Workshop is like more people are playing Warhammer. And so like, I think in the end, the fact that these 3D sculpts exists and that these 3D prints exists means that actually more people are going to continue to play Warhammer. And what we've seen, if you actually just look at the financials of the game, what we've seen from Warhammer financials is that Games Workshop has only gotten more popular. And when you think about the fact that 3D printing has also gotten more popular, you'd almost think that that would be not the case. But as they say, like a rising tide lifts all boats. And so what I think is happening, and I think it's a real phenomenon, is 3D printing and recasting is actually making the game more accessible for a lot of people. It's making it more affordable for a lot of people, which means more people that maybe wouldn't have played the game before are now playing the game, even if that means 50% of their models might not be authentic. And because of that, eventually they will be buying authentic Games Workshop models. They will be buying models that like from Games Workshop. It's not like everything they're going to buy is recast and 3D print. But by making the game more accessible to them because the models are cheaper, you're going to actually increase your customer base, which I actually think is something that is good for Games Workshop. And when you look at their financials, it bears out in the financials. They've had record years back to back. So by having like that kind of entry point or that cheaper entry point in a lot of ways, I actually think that Games Workshop benefits from the existence of 3D printing and recasting, because what it does is it gives people a stepstone into that Games Workshop hobby that is not as expensive and that's a little bit more approachable. And especially with the 3D prints, right? Like there's a lot of models, and I don't, a lot of people proxy models. I've always within Games Workshop, so I don't think there's anything wrong with proxying models as long as they're kind of like similar. Say like say for Empire, you find another range of miniatures that produces like say human models for guards, for instance, and you use those instead of Games Workshop ones. Now, whether those are another manufacturer's models, a 3D print, or a recast, in all three cases, Games Workshop is not getting your money. But now you're playing Warhammer and you weren't before, which means you're now in that ecosystem. So in a lot of ways, I do think that it's okay that Games Workshop actually owns, that these people are getting into the hobby through these alternative measures. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So yeah, Rat Ogres and Centurions, don't remind me. So where do I think the future is for 3D printing? So I think 3D printing, as the technology increases, I still don't think it's going to be mainstream for 5 to 10 years. There's just it's too much mess. Resin 3D printing is very, very like, I guess, it's very prone to accidents. It's very prone to mistakes. It's very prone to things not going correctly and being ruined. So I don't see resin 3D printing kind of taking over the entire thing. But what I do see is third-party manufacturers that can produce resin, or people having their own home 3D printers becoming more and more popular. And I don't think that that's going to hurt Games Workshop. I think at the end of the day, that's actually just going to help Games Workshop, because I think that more people will now be involved in the hobby and it'll have a wider spread of people. So ultimately, I think all these things actually just help Games Workshop. So I guess the final thing that I wanted to talk about is piracy. And piracy for me is, there's a few things that we want to talk about. So Battlescribe is something that I mentioned earlier, is a big thing. And Battlescribe is piracy. So if you use Battlescribe, you're essentially, all the information contained within is pirated. If you use, I have digital copies of all the codexes, the 9th edition ones as well. And the reason is because I don't believe in this the physical medium of army books. So I have pirated copies of all the army books. Now, is that okay? Well, again, it comes down to, I want Games Workshop to see that there's a need for this kind of product. I want them to look at the fact that I have a digital copy of my Death Guard book, and I own my Death Guard book. I have other copies of the other ones, but I don't use them. They just exist. But when I look at the fact that there's a demand for these digital copies and Games Workshop doesn't create them, it's a problem. Yeah, I agree with you guys. The rules should be free. We're in a digital age, and like right now, the fact that I have to pay for a physical book to get a code to put in an app that doesn't actually give me a copy of my book digitally, gives me kind of like a very poor man's version, that's a problem. So I think these are, I guess at the end of the day, like, when I look at a site like Wikipedia, which basically takes all of the information from the codexes, the army books, and compiles them on a website, and that's also piracy. But again, I think that they've created a tool that makes the game easier and more accessible for people to play, which I only think is a good thing. So in a lot of ways, I don't actually think Games Workshop is losing out due to the fact that these things exist. I think actually they grow the ecosystem and they make the game more accessible and more approachable for a lot of people. And what I think the lesson needs to be for Games Workshop is that they really should be looking at why people are using these things. So why are people using Battlescribe and why are people using Wikipedia? Well, it's because it's a superior way of delivering and rules. It's a superior way of building army lists. It's a superior way of accessing that content. And if Games Workshop wanted to make money, and I've said this many, many times, they could basically take these like a Wikipedia and create their own Wikipedia. Like I would pay for a Games Workshop Wikipedia, like $2.99 a month, that had all my rules on it digitally, that was like managed by Games Workshop and updated by Games Workshop, like something similar to that. But to be honest, it should be free. I would pay for digital books. I would pay for a digital kind of like subscription where I had access to all the rules from Games Workshop and all the codexes. I would pay them. And if they just could see that there's this popularity in these programs, I think they could make a lot more money. And it really bothers me that they don't see that. So now when it comes to things like Warhammer Plus, and I think it's gonna be a huge problem. If Games Workshop thinks that people aren't gonna pirate Warhammer Plus, they're joking. Because right now, as is, and obviously we don't have all the details, but as is, there's a lot of information that we don't have about Warhammer Plus, about like what else is gonna be on it, what else you're gonna get with it, the cost, etc. But I can tell you right now, very few people are gonna. It's gonna be pirated from like everywhere. And the problem is, again, is it's a value proposition. So you're telling people to pay for very little content that's got bad value, but people are still gonna want that content. So either you have to lower the price of that content to the point where it's I guess approachable and worth it, or people are just going to pirate it. That's just the reality, and games are can like that or not. But I guess I don't see a reality where I can't go get all the Warhammer Plus shows right away. Like there's just no way. I pay for Netflix. I have a Netflix subscription. I have a Spotify subscription. And with Netflix and Spotify, all of that stuff that I get on Netflix and Spotify, I can go get right now. So I also have a membership to IP Torrents, which is a membership-only torrent site, so I can get things online, certain shows. So every program that is available on Netflix, I can go get from IP Torrents instantly at high quality, 4K, 1080p, with very fast download speeds. So like within like 5 minutes, I can get like a 2 gig like movie file. But I don't do that. Why would I pay for Netflix when I have access to all of those movies for free? Well, the reason is because Netflix provides a great service, and Spotify, which is a music streaming service, also provides a great service, and it's great value for what I get. So I'm happy to pay the $15 to each of those services every month so I can get that great service and that great content. But those are exceptions, not the rule, right? So there's a lot of duds out there. There's a lot of companies that don't provide good services, and Games Workshop is one of them. And in the case of Warhammer Plus, I can imagine that it's not going to be a great service, it's not going to be great value, and it's not going to be well costed, right? So you're going to see a lot of piracy on Warhammer Plus, and I hope that Games Workshop comes up with some way to, I don't know, because again, I want Warhammer content, I want Warhammer movies, I want Warhammer TV shows, but I also don't want to reward Games Workshop's shitty business practices. So there's this push and pull where I don't want to pay, I don't want to support things that I believe are bad value. So we'll see. I mean, I think ultimately, kind of to sum up my thoughts on this subject, is Games Workshop needs to look at this whole ecosystem of recasting, piracy, IP theft, and look at if they want to make lots of money, and I know that they can. They could take on these industries head on, rather than just doing cease and desist, rather than trying to chase these people. There is a pathway here, I bet you, for Games Workshop to double the amount of money they make easily. Or 30% more, 40% more. Like they could do that. They just have to have a little bit of vision and a little bit of change their old ways and get out of their, I guess, they got to get out of their like their way of thinking, because I think ultimately Games Workshop has an opportunity here to really take on a lot of these areas, and I guess capitalize on this need in this market. But instead, they choose to ignore it and or do their own thing. And I think that's at their own peril, because at some point it will hit their bottom line, right? At some point 3D printing is going to get good enough where people are going to do 3D printing. And you know, as I said, with Piracy, it's easy enough. It's so easy. You can go get any of the Games Workshop army books right now, 9th edition, digital copies. So wouldn't I rather have a nice PDF copy, enhanced edition from Games Workshop that updates automatically? Of course I would, and I would pay for that. But they don't give me that option, so I'm just going to do what I have to do. So yeah, Warhammer comics are great. Oldhammer's great. You know, there's just a lot of business decisions where I feel like Games Workshop just doesn't know what they're doing. And it's hard to say that because they make so much money. So it's as if like you can't really be that critical, because you're like, well, look at the numbers, right? They're making tons of money. So do they really not know what they're doing? I mean, it's hard to say. So, but I think ultimately they're leaving a lot of money on the table, and I sympathize with people that do what they have to do to enjoy this hobby. And I really think that this problem of recasting and 3D printing and whatever, it's not going to go away. The recasts are just going to get more sophisticated. 3D printing is just going to get better. The piracy is going to be more rampant. And Games Workshop can ultimately join to be a part of that and take advantage of that, or they can try to fight it and spend a lot of money fighting it. But I think ultimately, you know, just as example of this chat, almost no one in the chat of the 100 people that have talked has said that they don't do this. So I think it's a fairly big thing in the community. Like, I don't think this is a case where you know, it's a small percentage. I think a lot of people are doing it, and a lot of people feel justified doing it, and that's actually a big issue, because what it means is that it's not going to stop. And so I guess my final thoughts, and you know, this is to Games Workshop if you're listening, is talk to people, figure out why they're doing these kinds of things, and adjust your business model to take advantage of it. And there is opportunity there. There's lots of money on the table for you guys to take this on, to make more money. You know, and until you guys get your shit together in a lot of ways, people are going to continue to do these things. So yeah, so those are my thoughts, guys. Leave some comments down below. Thanks everyone for engaging on the chat. I hope there's some, like, I guess, insight into where my thought process is. Continue to support Games Workshop, guys. I love Games Workshop. They're a great company. They do a lot of great things. They do a lot of awful things as well. But I love the game that they make, and I love the models that they make. And so I want to continue to see them succeed. And at the end of the day, I know that if we can get that message to them that hey, you guys are driving us to these places. How am I doing mental gymnastics about 99 Ninja? Tell me how I'm doing mental gymnastics. So I don't think I'm doing any mental gymnastics. I'm just telling you how it is. But ultimately, that's my opinion. And I think at the end of the day, Games Workshop, 3D printing is not going away. And we need to, and people are going to continue to purchase 3D printed models. They're going to continue to purchase recast, and then continue to pirate things. And so at the end of the day, Games Workshop can either make a choice to either kind of join and be a part of that, or they can kind of fight it. And I don't think they're going to win that battle in the end of the day. So they need to figure out why people are being driven to those 3D printing services or other areas, and take advantage of it. And I think that I want them to, because I would much rather, in all cases, just like I support Netflix and Spotify, I would much rather support the legitimate business. All right, guys, that's going to be it for today's stream. Hope everyone, hope I gave some of you guys some things to think about. And I will catch you guys Thursday for Best Overall Show. So have a great night, and thanks for tuning in.